Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to our panel on the advances of neurotech, software, and diagnostics. My name is Maciek, Drozdz, and I will moderate this discussion with our distinguished panelists, with our distinguished guests. I'll obviously suggest at first to go and give a chance to our panelists to introduce themselves. So Diana, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you, Maciek. I'm a co-founder and general partner at Panakès Ventures. We are a venture capital firm investing in life science all over Europe, in Israel, and in the US, with a specific focus on medtech, diagnostic, and digital health. Anything from seed to pre-IPO rounds, anything from $500,000 to 5.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Diana. Susanne, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Susanne Wilke. I'm the president and CEO of Cognoptix. Cognoptix is unique. We are diagnostic in detecting amyloid in the lens. So that's where we are unique in, and it's for early stage detection of Alzheimer's. So yeah, so it's a very unique approach.
Perfect, thank you. Andy?
Oh, hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm Andy Blackwell. I'm Chief Scientific Officer at Ieso Digital Health. So I've trained in neuroscience and psychology. We're one of the largest mental and behavioral telehealth care organizations in Europe. We're principally operating in the UK. We specialize in using data to develop technologies that can enable insight-driven or more personalized care delivery models. So looking forward to the panel.
Perfect, thank you, Andy. And David.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon, David Gordon. I'm head of investments for Longliv Ventures. Longliv Ventures is a VC out of the Hutchison group. And the main asset that's relevant to our fund of the Hutchison group is its amazing, huge footprint of drugstores. We operate 15,800 stores in 25 markets across Europe and Asia. And the fund was established and trusted with $100 million to invest in startup companies that could synergize with that amazing footprint of drugstores. Now, people need to appreciate, of course, that the retail health world is opting for to provide more and more value in the world of healthcare, and it changes, of course, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but there's lots happening and lots that the retail health can offer to the world of healthcare, and therefore we're trying to synergize with startup companies that can actually find merit in their go-to-market vectors, in being on the ground and close to the consumer and leveraging what the consumer is willing and able to do nowadays.
All right, perfect. Thank you, David. So at first, I'll probably start with just giving a little bit of a definition, what I think we should be discussing today at this panel. So for the purpose of our discussion, I'd like to define the neurotech as, let's say, a set of tools, both invasive and non-invasive, hardware and software, with the purpose of measuring and affecting, obviously, function of the brain, while utilizing a range of interfaces. So obviously we have the biological chemical interface, all the pharmacological interventions, but also through our senses, all the medical applications work through the senses that we already have, right? So hearing and sight, the touch sometimes, and obviously all the electrical interfaces, let's say, again, invasive and non-invasive, transcranial and electrodes. So, and the purpose again of our discussion, the way I thought we could discuss it today, is whether neurotech is getting to the point where we can derive new therapies from neurotech, whether neurotech can give the society a new range of therapies. So are there any problems that are holding it back? Are there any black swan innovations that are necessary? I hope that we can all discuss all of this at this panel. So the first is sort of again, state of affairs. Where are we in neurotech? Where neurotech is today? And And maybe, David, you could give us a short description of where you think, again, neurotechnology is and how it progressed through different phases in the last period of time.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that from the landscape that we see, and admittedly we don't look into the full range of healthcare applications. We look towards more large-scale problems that can reach the community, that are related to digital and consumer health. But I took a moment and looked through our database and tried to draw a mental picture along the lines of the famous hype curve in terms of what is hot and what is not yet hot, and what used to be hot and now is finally finding its place. So if you can imagine the hype curve, I won't go from the lowest part or from left to right, but first of all, the hot topics that seem to be very current now, and you'll see a lot of is the really the I hope it's well included in your definition. All the mental health care, and especially remote health care, are now really visual, really visible, very active. And that stems really from the tele-everything phenomena that COVID-19 has accelerated. So that's pretty obvious, and I think we'll be talking about that a lot. And there magically, we're talking about really relatively simple technology. It's a lot about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies, and in general behaviors. But that kind of, if you think that that's the most current, so what is already past the hype and in the plateau of productivity now. My observation, I think, of all the things that you could include, I think pain treatment, pain management, pain measurement are coming of age. We're seeing very nice offerings in that space. Measuring pain is part of the treatment, and certainly the various proposals of 2 electrodes in a clinical trial. In other words, neurostimulation, neuromodulation for if it's pain or nausea or psychological states. I think you mentioned brain-machine interface in our earlier conversation. In where that's relevant, that's coming of age as well. What has disappointed us? I'm going down to the trough of disillusionment. Like 10 years before, we had a lot of expectations about sleep and sleep management. There were so many offerings, and it's fallen to sleep. The sleep companies somehow have not made it yet, I think, and maybe that's going to happen. Same about memory applications. So what is kind of before and after the hype curve? We're seeing a lot of biomarkers around traumatic brain injuries, which I think will enter mainstream pretty soon. Stroke biomarkers, seizure detection, monitoring, and measuring. I think that's also poised to, because seizures can reflect lots of conditions more than the specific diseases. And ADHD would also have made a lot of sense. That's a huge issue, and we see less and less success at the moment in that space. And I would like to mention, last and not least, all the important work around the neurodegenerative sicknesses that we really need to get our act together there. There are bits and pieces of what would be a future dream, and it's still pretty far, and people need to really have a vision in order to invest in that domain at the moment. And I nod and bow to everyone that is working in that space.
All right, perfect. Thank you, David. Andy, I think it may be interesting for you to add here as well, because obviously you represent Ieso, the CBT company, also delivering most, if not all, right, help via the telehealth. How about how the world changed for you? What are again the sort of what is the progress, how you feel as a company again changed or affected both by the pandemic, but also by by the sort of progress of technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an extraordinary year for us, and in January this year, about 3% of mental health care was delivered online in the UK in our core market, and in August, pretty much all mental health care was delivered online. So we've seen about, as a finger in the air estimation, maybe 15 years of progress occur in 6 months, and so now more than ever, there's an extraordinary need, of course, for that type of access to treatment when people are self-isolating and so on. And so it's been quite a long journey for us, from randomized controlled trials in 2009 to what's now quite a large business. But it sort of feels like the world is for the first time coming to us, and that's been it's been useful to, we felt good about being helpful in this context. I think there are two other things that I think are happening right now that are a sort of collision of technology and data that are going to enable a period of probably very explosive progress in mental health science as well as mental health care in the next 3 to 5 years. And those are really, so COVID-19 has radically increased the use of telemedicine systems, telehealth care, behavioral telehealth care, and that's generating vast amounts of data. And so I was just saying to Maciek yesterday that in the UK alone, this year will generate 50 petabytes of data just in the telemedicine, in primary care, in adult mental health care alone. And if you think about it, what that's describing is the chemistry of effective care. So we measure outcome for every patient. And so there's more data being generated. We have technologies, so we've invested significantly in the development of deep learning models. So that's specifically deep learning's application in decoding language. So if you think about mental health conditions, most of the information about someone's mental health and their response to treatment is encapsulated in the form of human conversation. And yet it's been very hard to turn that human conversation into quantitative data that can be analyzed, like some SNPs in someone's genome, or the structure of a bone fracture, or blood chemistry. We haven't been able to look at it and make sense of it before, but now we can, because we have some technologies that enable us to sort of decompose the chemistry of the human language, and so there's more data. We can make sense of the data, and also we have, with the sort of pervasive use of telemedicine, we have a channel or a vehicle through which we can give powerful decision support technologies and digital therapeutics to clinicians. So, they have us, in our system, it's like a satellite navigation. It's not treating the patient, and in some fully autonomous way, although we do use dialogue models in some of the care delivery. But it is assisting the human clinician in delivering care and learning kind of from the experience of all of the clinicians in the network. We have about 800 in our UK business overall time in answering, what should I say next, or what should I do next with this patient? So more data, we can make sense of data, and we can translate data into insights in a usable form for clinicians. And so we've seen our outcome rates move past what one would expect in face-to-face care very substantially and incrementally every 6 months for the last 5 years. And that's all about using data in some practical and purposeful, careful, of course, way. So I see, it's been a year of transformation. Most of the fuel of innovation that's coming is from real-world healthcare data, and kind of closing the loop between the characteristics of a patient, the intervention that they receive, and the outcome, and we can do that with technology.
All right, perfect. Now, the real world data, I guess, is is the true keyword here that will probably jumpstart a lot of interesting observations and hopefully again become the source for future therapies. Now, there probably are again still challenges or what I call again sort of need for black swan type of events. Things that are holding back neurotech from delivering even more value, I guess, to society. So I'm curious what the panel can tell us about these challenges, or again, the black swans. Diana, can you share with us your thoughts on this?
Sure. I am an active investor in the space, so I'll give you my perspective from the portfolio I have invested in, and the many I follow constantly and monitor. I think in this space there is a big dilemma. First of all, is the fact that those therapies provided by, for example, neurostimulation, neuromodulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, all these new technologies, they are proven to go on the market in clinical trials. Those who do it smart, they do prove it in clinical trials, in randomized control trial, and they prove the efficacy by choosing endpoints which are very similar, if not identical, to the ones that are used in the pharma world. So, just to give an example, if migraine is treated by neurostimulation, invasive, non-invasive, or by drug, if the endpoint is still at the end, the reduction of the pain, the reduction of the symptomatology, to me, it's the same kind of therapy. I don't see, then there must be an additional level of sophistication in considering disease-modifying, non-disease modifying. But in the end, is this symptomatology is going away? Is the migraine treated? Is the patient better? Is he living better? To me, the effect is the same. So I would definitely call them therapies delivered by devices. And I can think of similar examples in depression, in epilepsy, in sleep apnea, Parkinson. All these pathologies, which are very serious, can be treated both by pharma, by drugs, and by a device approach with advantages and disadvantages. Now, what seems to be fantastic, because in the end, we all understand that to go through a drug discovery and drug approval process, the regulatory process, and the risk that is taken from preclinical to market approval is quite significant. While if we decide, if we go for a device, we may well think that the risk is more limited. And this is the black swan, in my opinion, because product development has always proven to be a challenge, and it's in particular in invasive device, implantable devices, of course, but product development and trial design are the two big challenges of the space, in my opinion, and very comparable, and have absorbed a very comparable amount of money to the drug world. It's in the end is not very different. So what we investors sometimes are perceiving as a lower risk, it may be a big challenge. And I will mention the last one topic is the IP, because in the space of those devices, the IP landscape is highly populated. There are several thousand issued patents in the space, and so the challenge is also to find the right spot and the right invention to be able to then protect the innovation. But in the end, I think it's the value that we are generating investing in those type of devices is very rewarding if once the device gets on the market and is approved and gets on the market.
Susanne,
I may ask
go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
A follow-on question. From your experience, Diana, what we've seen is that when the outcomes are supposed to be the same, and we're trying to replace the drug, but then when a company has this device. They have a clinical trial. Then they end up with 2 electrodes or something that includes 2 electrodes. And all of a sudden, it's not so much a medical device anymore. I'm not talking about the intrusive technologies. It's not a medical, it all of a sudden becomes a consumer device. And that mixture of worlds is not working well.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the invasive, non-invasive approach. And I absolutely tend to say that it's already a challenge to get that reward of medical value creation for invasive company. Non-invasive company are perceived by everyone, including the financial community, as consumer product. Because, I mean, the non-invasiveness is also very, the non-invasiveness drives compliance, lack of compliance most of the time. So it's a therapy where it becomes difficult to deliver the therapy itself. And so the non-invasiveness goes really very much into the consumer world. I agree with you. It's already tough for the implanted device to sort of get this perception that they are therapies as much as others, as much as drugs. But non-invasive is almost impossible, I would say.
Although again, the consumerization of this particular field is really, really interesting. You know, again, all these headbands and all these devices that can, you know, measure EEG and so on, and interest of, you know, consumers to really, at least try and see, you know, how it works. It's actually, you know, quite interesting. Again, seeing all these apps that can also in some way, again, you know, maybe not in the most regulated way, but in some way at least improve or claim to improve, you know, some functionalities of our senses or the brain itself. So that's interesting. Susanne, I'm curious about your views in terms of, you know, this particular topic, challenges. Do you see any challenges or, again, you know, areas where we as, again, society need to do more research on, or again, in some way find solutions to this to problems that are in you know, holding back neurotech from delivering new therapies?
So I'm looking at it from an Alzheimer's point of view, right? Because that's where we are in. And I want to just say a couple of things of the field itself, because I think, you know, it's a huge problem and it's a growing problem as we age. But there is potentially a breakthrough at the moment where we have finally honed into a class of compounds that is coming to the market, as a matter of fact, almost, I'm hoping imminently, that helps to remove early forms of amyloid aggregates, all right? And that is a breakthrough because in the field, we focused on very late stage removal first. And now we are understood that there's different forms, and the earlier we can capture those forms, the better it is. So we may have therapeutics that actually help patients, but we don't have diagnostics. That's where we are coming in to really identify those patients, right? And what we find, and I'm going to get to the other topic, but what we find is what we want to do as a company, we want to take diagnosis for Alzheimer's mainstream, right? To take it forward, to engage people midlife, essentially, when this starts happening, to start questioning, can I do something to improve my cognitive health as we age, right? And that engagement is really hard because, you know, anything that we have with the brain is usually, you know, changing our personality, changing who we are as people, or how efficient we are. So people have stigma getting involved in their own care. And I think that's a big topic that if we attract it or catch it early, maybe it's not as, you know, there's not as much stigma when we say, okay, you have a risk factor for, say, Alzheimer's, physiologically, something like this. But the engagement of people in their own mental health, in my mind, is still not, you know, where it should be. Like just this whole discussion about what we need to do in order to stay mentally healthy. And so that's one thing. I think in terms of technology, I'm fascinated by how the brain works. And I think what we have seen a lot of successes when we find areas like in Parkinson's, where we target a particular layer of cells, or like in the retina, if we target blindness. I think that is a specific area that we can focus on how to interface with, for example, computer chips or whatever kind of technology, when we find there's specific layers of cells that we can target. If it's something more diffuse, like in Alzheimer's, where we have networks, synaptic networks and neuronal networks, I think it's much harder to stimulate, and our response needs to be like there is neuro-EM that works with electromagnetic wave, sort of like matching what we see as the flaw, right, as the breakdown. In Alzheimer's, it's the breakdown of neuronal networks. And so if you can stimulate those to keep them up and revitalize them, maybe that is the way to go. But I think it is sort of like figuring out areas that are specific enough so we can actually find tools to match that specific layer, like how to get to that layer in that particular point. So that is understanding the brain better, how it works, and then how we specifically can intervene at these specific points. So I think it's interesting. I don't think we have done it systematically yet, where we kind of say, okay, where do we see certain centers of activities, and what does it mean, how we can intervene in these particular areas. So.
Now, one challenge, or what I at least think about, the area where this field, but also similarly, I guess other fields need to get through is to create this positive, any feedback loops where you measure. A single device can measure activity, let's say, of an area of the brain, in a diseased brain. The people with psychiatric diseases can detect, something is going on there, and then act on this, right? And then create a particular stimulus, help in some way. So it's basically, either again to alleviate the symptoms or even cure diseases. So again, a device that can both measure and then sort of act on this diagnostic, feedback devices. Any of the panelists can comment on this particular challenge, let's say? Is that something that we should expect from the neurotech to come in the next years, or that is too far away to even think about?
Absolutely, measurement is part of the management. So when treatment is not, and usually it isn't a one-time transaction, with rather a condition management. Very much like diabetes care is kind of the gold standard of that. I think the ultimate digital therapeutic was invented over the diabetes case study. But so if you're thinking of pain, for example, people that suffer from things that are relatively common, like lower back pains, by being able to objectively measure pain, the treatment obviously will be upgraded. We know of a company that actually measures pain while during an operation, while the person is in anesthesia. Now, you'd think that there's no need for that at all, right? Because they don't feel anything. But as a matter of fact, it's very important because the pain indicates potential internal damage, and the doctors actually change medication accordingly. So I think we're going to find, like, think of ADHD all the way on the other side of the spectrum. No one really knows how to dose the Ritalin. It's pretty much an art or a protocol thing, trial and error. And if you could measure the response of the child wherever you're looking for effect, you're going to improve the treatment. So I think you're absolutely right that it is part of, maybe that's the most promising area, is where you can actually measure and do better what you've been doing so far.
Right. So another thing, at least I can think about another challenge, let's say, or this black swan event is something, again, what is described as technology convergence. So where technologies, where different pieces of treatment, I guess, come from different areas. I use maybe, to using the same language I used at defining the topic, use different interfaces to access the brain. So again, pharmacology or electrostimulation, or again, our sensors, and how we can converge, or how the different technology can converge, let's say, in a platform that can deliver, again, even better therapies. How data, again, and the data sciences can, become also one of the pieces, let's say, of this technology convergence to deliver better therapies, and how, again, the neurotech can become the platform for that. I'm curious again about the panelists' views on this. Andy, could you maybe take us through that? What do you think?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems that we face is how to get people the right treatment at the right intensity with the right dose for the right duration that's enough to get people well, but not so much that it's unnecessarily burdensome, which in many areas of the world, particularly in where I'm focused right now, psychotherapy that goes on for 10 years. People often will say, I'm not sure it's working. And I'm saying, if you're having psychotherapy for 10 years, I can be certain, you can be certain that it's not working, because people tend to respond in 6 hours if it's effective. So I think technology that enables people to find the right thing, be that a digital therapeutic, a human clinician, psychopharmacology, and escitalopram, fluoxetine, whatever it is, how do you choose? It's a lot of that we are leaving to chance right now. So I think there are intelligent systems that we can learn, that we can build actually out of real world data, but answering those questions can only be really achieved in, it's like genomics. You have to have an enormous amount of data in order to be able to get to that. So I see the innovation being sort of born out of large real world data assets, where outcome is associated with intervention in large populations of people. I think David's point about titration of dosing, particularly in Parkinson's disease is a great example, isn't it? Because you've got that kind of trade-off between, cranking up the dopamine replacement therapy and you get the dyskinesia, but if you don't, you get the off. And then at some point, maybe high frequency microstimulation comes on board, and getting that right when you're seeing a neurologist every 2 years in most health systems is super difficult. There should be a closed loop system, which is measuring tremor, and it's measuring rigidity, and it's measuring the dose that you're taking, and it can make intelligent recommendations, not born out of your particular experience, but born out of everybody's experience at the same time. And science, the whole paradigm, mental health and neuroscience, has not got there yet. I will say that. We're still in labs doing very small studies. And most of the stuff I've ever published I now look at it and I think, well, that was underpowered and probably wouldn't replicate, if I'm honest. But when you see it in thousands and tens of thousands of people, I think we can get to that. So I think there is a convergence. It's about large curated data assets where people can run in silico modeling experiments to say, what if we gave this person, 40 milligrams of methylphenidate, and they had 3 sessions of cognitive reattribution based cognitive behavioral therapy, and they modified their diet in this particular way. It's so complex, but the answers are already described in data that's already being collected, which is the great news.
All right. Sure, go ahead.
Quickly, is there, but since you're collecting this data and analyzing it, can you use AI to sort of like identify sort of endpoints or test out different endpoints where you can find sort of like, okay, this is sort of like what we can measure as our endpoint that's more representative, or like how we define success or behavior changes or things like that? I mean, how would that work?
Yeah, so that's precisely what. So one of the things that our lab is doing, we have a great lab in Cambridge, which is we took a sample of 10,000 people with depression, subtyped them in terms of the sort of phenotypic expression of the depression, what it's characterized by, and there seem to be 3 reliable subtypes, and then I replicated that in another 10,000 people to see whether it's still there. And then we take the 4 forms of cognitive behavioral therapy that are commonly used for depression, and we can parametrically match them against the subtype. And then when somebody comes along, you can say, so we're right in the middle of all of that science now. We've done the 2 replications, and now we're doing the pattern matching. So I think that's exactly what it is, because they're not singular conditions. And certainly mental health has just been, it's my discipline, so I can say wishy-washy. It's different with amyloid pathology in the eye. There's a specificity to that, isn't there? And but I think we can. I think that's exactly right. We need a mandate to be able to collect and use data in this way. But I really think that's where the transformation is going to come from. It won't be about very niche. I also used to work in a transcranial magnetic stimulation project, and I think it has its place. I think those technologies do, but we also have a whole plethora of currently available interventions, psychotherapy and pharmacotherapy, that if we took the trial and error about which one of those things you should take out, we would make very much more progress than we will by inventing all kinds of fancy population neuronal recording technology, that sort of stuff, which there's a place for it, but there's so much more that we can do with learning from what we have at just a much bigger scale.
Yeah, I think about developing new biomarkers. Do you think machine learning and AI techniques can break the glass ceiling there?
I think we have a project running called Cognitive and Behavioral Biomarkers, which is of course with patients' consent, we're taking information about their movement, who they interact with, their language, the tone of their language, the social media use. And what we're trying to do is to build passive detection models that can, in people who are very poorly, when they come to seek help, and when they're better after help, so that you can then give them a personalized tool that they keep with them that can alert them to a relapse, for example, so you can get more timely intervention. Those things are not describable like a patient-reported outcome metric that we've all used in psychopharmacological trials. They are detecting a whole complex pattern of symptoms and behavior that characterizes a problem that someone's experiencing. So I think even the diagnosis, I'll be controversial for a minute. I think even we will come away from the point where a singular diagnostic, name depression, I think it'll become a nonsense, and we'll have to be prepared to perhaps have non-explainable patterns in data that suggest that you will respond to these things at this dose for this amount of time, and then actually the diagnosis itself will become redundant. But
all right, thank you. Thanks, Andy. We have another couple of minutes, 2 minutes really left. So just one thing, and I don't think we have really time to discuss that, but again, is the continuity of care, right? Where neurotech can give us, diagnosis. To your point, Andy, we'll probably just see patterns in data. Then, we can basically use, pharmacological approach and then maintenance using some, let's say, medical app. Now, one thing that I would really like to at least touch upon with each of you is basically, is the neurotech, again, with all of this that we just discussed, ripe to become the next frontier for new therapies, in psychiatric diseases and neurodegenerative diseases? And again, we have about a minute for this. So, if you could please be short with the answers. David. Maybe Andy?
Sorry, I was muted.
You go ahead, David.
I was going to say that if you're asking if we're having fun already, is the vision materializing? Is neurotech happening? Probably not. Not yet.
Okay, Andy?
I'm a pathological optimist, so I'm going to say I think we might be on the cusp of it, but I think it won't be so much the hardware. It'll be the data that emerge in this closing loop concept so they can continuously get better as the technology is used. And so it's that sort of recursive pattern that will take us forward.
Diana?
No, I'm even more optimist. Selectively, but yes, it's going to be,
all right.
be big.
Susanne?
So am I. I'm actually very optimistic about it. I think we kind of finally cracking, what I'm thinking, visualization and knowing and seeing synapses where everything happens is actually super important. And I think we are at the cusp of getting a handle on this. And once we know this, we can really measure a lot more effectively input and output, right? We can see what synapses are firing ultimately. And I think that's sort of like once we understand that, then we can see if somebody's depressed. Okay, what happens there? I think that visualization is really critical.
All right, perfect. I think we are at the end of the panel. Probably need the organizers to help us. Are there any questions to the panelists coming? I don't see any questions at this point. Of course, yes. It was a great pleasure to be on the panel, to chair the panel, and I hope that it was also a good experience for all viewing, and I hope the panelists also had time to share all the views. I thank you, certainly from my end, and again, everybody, you're welcome to have a closing remark, and thank you again for participating.